Hello everyone, back to our latest Star Wars video. So I've been away for a little while, been busy on my weather channel and haven't had time to do any uploads. I have been keeping a close eye on Star Wars news, and this story or interview caught my attention a couple of days ago. Rian Johnson appears to be comparing The Last Jedi with The Empire Strikes Back, that wonderful masterpiece created by Irving Kershner, and also, of course, Lawrence Kasdan, and not forgetting George Lucas and John Williams, and so many other people that were involved in bringing The Empire Strikes Back together. It appears that Rian Johnson is trying to give us the idea that maybe The Last Jedi would be remembered as the masterpiece of the sequel trilogy. I think that's very, very unlikely, but we'll go over the story in a moment, and then I'll give my two penneth about it. Just to say, if you're enjoying the style of content on the channel, which I know I don't upload as much as I should do, but I'm so busy with the day job, with the weather videos, then please like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you think. So we're at /film.com for this one. Rian Johnson on Star Wars fandom and why The Empire Strikes Back resonates with him. It was released on Wednesday, 11th of September, and it was written by Ben Pearson. So it starts, Star Wars The Last Jedi writer-director Rian Johnson is still in the early stages of writing his upcoming Star Wars spin-off trilogy, but as we wait to discover what he has in store for the future of a galaxy far, far away, Johnson participated in an interview in which he reflected on arguably the most beloved film of the franchise and the state of Star Wars fandom as it exists today. Read his comments below. Johnson's upcoming murder mystery, Knives Out, received a rapturous response when it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, but a recent interview with Up Rocks eventually circled around some Star Wars talk. This is a direct quote from Rian Johnson. As a kid, I distinctly remember being disappointed by The Empire Strikes Back, he said. That was my first one. I think my dad taught me when I was really, really young to see A New Hope. Yeah, no, I remember especially in the context of Return of the Jedi, which as a kid I adored. So, yeah, I remember very vividly that Empire was polarising for years, but then Empire slowly became my favourite one. When the interviewer said he remembered seeing it as a kid and being disappointed, but it wasn't as fun as he expected, Johnson agreed, while also working in his thoughts about Star Wars fandom at large. Yeah, it sucks. That's why I remember that one, even though at the time I had that reaction to it. It stuck with me and it resonated with me. I remember the prequels, that acrimony of prequels. I think people forget exactly the tenor of the danger. We remember because we were in the thick of it. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that anything with a passionate following always has a passionate following, and Star Wars is that, even more so. You can't be angry at one side of it when it's also the reason the positive is so passionate, you know. It's all part of the same thing, and it always was like this basic thing. That's why I love it. So, he doesn't really compare The Last Jedi with The Empire Strikes Back, but clearly he's sort of dangling the carrot. He's trying to plant the seed that in years to come, although a lot of people are very disappointed with The Last Jedi, it will eventually become to be remembered as the masterpiece of the sequel trilogy. And Rian Johnson definitely believes he has created a masterpiece with the sequel trilogy in terms of The Last Jedi. For me, there is a huge difference between The Last Jedi and between The Empire Strikes Back. There is absolutely no comparison whatsoever between the two films. Now, he is correct. It is correct that Empire, when it was originally released in 1980, was generally quite poorly received by critics. A lot of critics found it slow, found it ponderous. They didn't, at the time, the idea of having the main battle at the beginning of the film and then having a very long midsection where very little happens They didn't understand that, a lot of the critics, and also the fact that it was very open-ended. It's not really an end to The Empire Strikes Back, it just kind of stops. There's no resolution to anything. A lot of critics criticised The Empire Strikes Back for that as well in 1980. The fans were generally quite disappointed with it as well, although it was a mixed response. But the fans, I think, were very shocked by the tone of The Empire Strikes Back compared to Star Wars: A New Hope. Star Wars: A New Hope was very vibrant. It was very slapstick. It was very light-hearted. It didn't take itself too seriously, but it wore its heart on its sleeve. Whereas The Empire Strikes Back was a much, much darker film. And also, as I say, it had that long mid-section where very little happens, where Luke is being trained on Dagobah by Yoda, and Han and Leia are on the run in the Millennium Falcon. And that long mid-section, where very little happens, did throw a lot of fans off kilter. And then, of course, you get the shock at the end, which, at the time, everybody accepts it now, of course, that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. But at the time, in 1980, that was a huge reveal. And, again, particularly the younger audience were very, very shocked by that revelation. In fact, I know that before The Empire Strikes Back was released, George Lucas sounded out psychiatrists to see how children would respond to this revelation of Darth Vader, the epitome of evil, being revealed as Luke Skywalker's father. And he went into a lot of research about what the probable response would be with children. The overall consensus from those psychiatrists and psychologists was generally that children would deny going to denial about that revelation. And I think the wider audience perhaps did that a little bit as well at the end of The Empire Strikes Back. The wider audience wasn't sure whether that was the truth or whether, everything had been turned on its head. So there was a very mixed response to The Empire Strikes Back, definitely. And over time, the reputation of the film has grown as The Empire Strikes Back was released on, first of all, VHS video, and then, of course, all the DVD and Blu-ray releases, as well as the repeat viewings on TV. Over time, people have become, sort of the children, I suppose, that grew up with it, have become to appreciate The Empire Strikes Back for its boldness, for its darkness, for its courage in terms of storytelling, and going in that direction that so many people didn't suspect. I mean, they could have, after the success of Star Wars: New Hope, they could have made a direct sequel to that film and could have sort of remade it. That's what the temptation is to do with a lot of follow-ups, with a lot of sequels, that you would just try to cash in, if you like, on the success of the previous one and make it a very, very similar film in tone and story. What they did with The Empire Strikes Back was made it totally on the other side in terms of tone. It's very, very dark film, as I say, and of course it has these very, very surprising story beats within it, having the battle at the beginning of the film rather than at the end of the film, having that long mid-section where very little happens, and then having the lightsabers fight in Cloud City and the revelation. So it was, for its time, was very bold, and yes, it did have a mixed reception, both from fans and from critics. That is where the similarity with The Last Jedi ends, because the thing with The Empire Strikes Back is that everybody is consistent, all the characters are consistent. They build upon where the characters leave off at the end of Star Wars: A New Hope, so you get more fleshed out characters with The Empire Strikes Back. But they don't do complete 180s on the characters. The characters are consistent as we know them in A New Hope. They are just expanded upon. Whereas, of course, in The Last Jedi, what the real problem with The Last Jedi is the fact that the characters, and particularly Luke Skywalker, bear no resemblance whatsoever to the character that we have known before. So everybody was waiting to see Luke Skywalker return as the Jedi Knight that we remember, albeit, yes, a developed character. Nobody would have expected him to have gone through the previous 30 years without any issues or any problems, so everybody would have expected that this character would come with baggage, both from what happened in the original films, the fact that his father is Darth Vader, and what happened on the second Death Star. That would, of course, have had a psychological effect, if nothing else, on Luke Skywalker. But generally, the fans wanted to see a Jedi Knight kind of in the role of Alec Guinness, I suppose, as Obi-Wan in the original Star Wars film, or Liam Neeson perhaps in Qui-Gon. That would have been the way I'd have gone, actually. I'd have made him more of a Qui-Gon type character, a very wise, very wise, powerful Jedi Master. Not flawless. Qui-Gon in Phantom Menace is not flawed. He makes mistakes, particularly in terms of his belief that Anakin should be trained, and he goes against the Jedi Code in Phantom Menace. So you would expect Luke to not be perfect. He would have flaws. He would have character flaws. He would have issues from his past experiences, but you wouldn't expect Luke to be a character that tosses away his father's lightsaber when Rey gives it to him. You wouldn't expect Luke to be a character that goes into his nephew's bedroom and contemplates murdering him. There are so many other problems and issues with Luke that we have along the way. The fact that he has cut himself off from the Jedi and from the Force, and it's never really explained why he's done that. Yes, his nephew has gone to the dark side, but as Mark Hamill himself has said, Luke would probably would go away for a little while, but then he would come back and be more determined than ever to solve the problem. He wouldn't just abandon everybody and go and isolate himself onto that island. And of course, it's not actually explicitly explained in The Last Jedi, but at the beginning of the Last Jedi, Luke is actually contemplating suicide at that point. He's in a suicidal state, and that is just something, I think, that is such a leap from the Luke Skywalker that we know in the original trilogy, that it is very much like a brand new character. So Luke in the sequel trilogy should be the character that is kind of like bonding. It should be the glue that's bonding the sequel trilogy to the original trilogy, if you like, because there is Han Solo, of course, but he gets killed off in The Force Awakens. Leia's barely in it. I don't think Carrie Fisher was particularly well when she was making these films, and although nobody wants to say anything nasty about Carrie, you can see from her performance that she is struggling quite a bit in both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. So Luke, Mark Hamill, should have been the all-encompassing character that sort of glued these sequel trilogy films together with the original trilogy, so that the audience can make that connection to what has gone before. And instead, we have Luke barely featuring in The Force Awakens, and then he is a totally different character in The Last Jedi. And that, in particular, I think, is the problem with The Last Jedi. Of course, there are also other problems. The humour doesn't hit its mark very often, whereas the humour in The Empire Strikes Back is very, very good. It's just enough in The Empire Strikes Back to be genuinely funny, particularly the banter but back and forth between Han and Leia. And also, of course, Yoda is originally set up as quite a funny character in the first sort of 10 minutes that he's in The Empire Strikes Back, when it becomes much more serious. But the humour generally in The Empire Strikes Back is very good, whereas the humour in The Last Jedi is very, very off-kilter. It's not Star Wars until we have that dreadful Yo Mama joke with Poe Dameron in the first few minutes of the film, and that really sets the tone of the film. The humour just isn't right for Star Wars. It would probably be okay in a slapstick comedy that's centred around an Earth-like environment, but in a Star Wars film, it just doesn't hit the right notes at all. The humour is very, very off in The Last Jedi. It's ponderous. It has that dreadful sequence on Canto Bight where we take Finn and also Kelly Marie Tran's character, which I've tried to expunge from my mind. I can't actually remember what the character was called at this point. But Finn and Kelly Marie's Kelly Marie Tran's character go off to Canto Bight. We get this silly, pointless storyline where they're looking for a code breaker, and we get a lecture about slavery, but they leave the children as slaves and they free the animals, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. If you're going to lecture the audience about slavery, then at least at the end of it, free the children. Don't leave the children as slaves and free the animals. But I mean, both animals and children should be freed, of course, but that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's very pretentious. There are so many things wrong with The Last Jedi. We've got the silly storyline with Rey and Kylo Ren, where she barely knows him, but she goes off. She leaves Luke Skywalker. She goes off to Kylo Ren for no reason whatsoever. She has one scene where she sees him shirtless, and after that she completely has her mind turned and off she goes running to him for no reason whatsoever. I could go on and on and on about this film. There's also, of course, the ridiculous storyline with the purple-haired lady. Again, the name of that character, I've completely tried to expunge it from my mind, so people will tell me in the comments, I'm sure, the names of these characters. But Laura Dern's character, we've got that ridiculous storyline where she's kind of like set up almost as a villainous type character. You think she's a villainous type character, but it turns out actually she's quite a heroic character. But she's a ridiculous character because she doesn't tell anybody what her plan is when Leia is in the coma, and of course she finds herself subject to a mutiny on the ship from Poe Dameron, and it's just a very, very, very silly film. There is absolutely no resemblance whatsoever between The Last Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back. In 20 years' time, The Last Jedi will not be remembered as a masterpiece as The Empire Strikes Back is. The reputation of The Last Jedi will not grow in 20 years' time. If anything, the reputation of The Last Jedi will get worse and worse and worse because the film does not stand up to repeat viewers. I've only seen it twice. Saw it once at the cinema when it came out. I didn't want to go back and see it again. I have seen it once on a DVD release, and it just gets worse as you see it. You see more and more flaws about this film and what they did to Luke Skywalker, the way he was character assassinated, and the way he basically has no resemblance to Luke that we know before. That just gets more and more irritating as it goes along. So this film, The Last Jedi, I'm sorry Rian Johnson, if you think The Last Jedi will be remembered and become more beloved as the years go by, the decades go by, and if you think you've made a masterpiece, you are very badly mistaken. It's a poor film. It's not only a dreadful Star Wars film, it is a poor film generally. It does have a few things going for it. Rian Johnson is very cinematic, as I've explained in other videos, so the way he frames the shots is very cinematic, and there are moments in there that are really quite beautiful, particularly where Laura Dern's character does a kamikaze fly into a Star Destroyer. That shot is actually gorgeous, and if it wasn't for the fact that the storyline itself makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, it would be a terrific moment. In fact, it is a terrific cinematic moment. There are various points in The Last Jedi that are very visual, very cinematic. I know a lot of people laugh at Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher's fly Mary Poppins-like through space, but the actual way that shot, I thought that was quite a nice shot. It's very visual, and it has John Williams' score with Princess Leia's theme going with it, and the way the two come together, I thought that was very nice, very visually well done, but of course it is very, very silly at the same time. So, to get back to the point, there is no resemblance between The Last Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back. Also, the score of The Empire Strikes Back is probably John Williams' masterpiece. For me, it's between Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith as to which is the best score that John Williams has produced, certainly for Star Wars and maybe of all time. So the score on The Last Jedi was just very poor. Most of it was like background music. None of it made any impression on me whatsoever. And the same was true, really, with the score that John Williams created for The Force Awakens. They've both been very, very poor scores. Rey's theme is quite nice, but other than that, they have been very poor scores. I'm not sure why these new directors, J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, have not been able to gel with John Williams. I'm not sure why that has been the case, but that has definitely been evident that they have not been able to gel, these directors, with John Williams as well as George Lucas did. Hopefully, with George being more involved, supposedly, it could all be spin, but with George being more involved in the Rise of Skywalker, George might give John Williams more guidance, and we'll get a memorable score to sign off with for these sequel films. But the score on The Last Jedi is very, very poor, particularly by John Williams and Star Wars standards, whereas the score on The Empire Strikes Back is absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't bought it, get to Amazon, buy the score for The Empire Strikes Back. It is a wonderful score in its own right, without any of the visuals from the film. The score is absolutely brilliant. So, no, sorry, Rian Johnson, I'm afraid you're deluded if you think that your film, The Last Jedi, is going to be remembered, but like The Empire Strikes Back, there's no comparison between the two. And I'm afraid your film is destined to be the worst Star Wars film in terms of the saga films. Anyway, the worst Star Wars film that we have. We don't have a Rise of Skywalker going to turn out, of course, so far. But I would rate it. I would rate it actually just a little bit ahead of The Force Awakens, because I think because it's a bit more visual. And there are some surprising story beats in there, albeit they don't make much sense. But I would rate it just a little bit ahead of The Force Awakens. But I'm in the minority of that. Most people, most fans, would rate it behind The Force Awakens and also behind The Phantom Menace. So, sorry, Ryan. If you think The Last Jedi is going to be remembered as the masterpiece of the sequel trilogy, like The Empire Strikes Back is remembered as the masterpiece of George Lucas's Star Wars saga, then you're very much mistaken. But it's not going to happen. If anything, The Last Jedi's reputation will get worse and worse and worse as the years go by. That's my prediction. What do you think in the comments? Please let me know what you think. Please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back with new Star Wars content very soon. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.